Hey guys, Bryce with Trick Tools here, and today I'm going to show you guys how to install your Milwaukee Portaband into the Portaband Pro jig. So walk you guys through the steps here. So when you open your Portaband Pro jig, it's pretty much as you see it right here. You're going to have instruction booklet with it, and then also a little baggie with an Allen wrench, a couple of aluminum cups here, and then some shims that we'll explain later on. So for starters, when you get this out on the table, what you want to do is remove some of the brackets that help hold the Portaband Pro in place. So, and to cover real quick, some of the tools you're going to need for doing this, you're going to need a 3/4 inch wrench, a 9/16 wrench, a 1/2 inch wrench, and then an 11/16 wrench as well. And you can use a wrench or a ratchet and socket, whatever works for you there. So, and then if you do get the deluxe kit that has the optional clamp for the jig, you'll need a 1/4 inch wrench as well, Allen wrench as well. So, and then so at this point, you want to take your 1/2 inch wrench and you'll loosen up the bolts on the front bracket here. Get that removed. So we'll back that out. Make sure you don't lose your hardware. And then set this aside. We're going to grab the 9/16. We're going to loosen up and remove the bracket on the back side here. There on the front bracket, there is some nuts on the back side of those bolts, so you'll need to retain those. This here has threaded inserts into the jig itself, so you can just unthread those, and there's the plate there, so remove that. So the next thing you're going to want to do is to take your jig. You're going to want to undo the chain here, and then you'll tilt it back, pop off the shock on the back side. It just removes with this little quick clasp here. So pop that out of place there. Then you're going to want to stand this up on end this way. So you have these knobs here that are for the handle adjustment that hold the bottom end of the handle of the Portaband. So you're going to want to back these out. These are going to be threaded all the way in, so you're going to back these out about 1 inch per side. So we'll get that backed out, both sides there. And then inside the jig here, there's a little bolt Allen head on the top here, and then there is a nut on the back side, and that is holding the little trigger switch mechanism in place. So you want to remove that bolt and remove the little trigger piece here. So get that removed, because we'll have to reinstall that later, but after the Portaband is in the jig here. So make sure you save that bolt, don't lose it. And so at this point, you're ready to install the Portaband. So you'll take your Portaband. First off, you want to remove your battery. And then you'll, holding the saw with the bottom of the handle and the trigger side down, you want to install the front edge first. Get that inside the jig and get this kind of set down in place there. And just to hold it in place, actually, I'm forgetting one step here. So inside this baggie, I mentioned about these aluminum cups. So these aluminum cups here go on the pads for these handles. So you'll reach on the inside, slide those in place. Slide this out. Get those in place there. All right, get that back in there, and going to thread this one on a little bit. Get that one in, and you want to just get this in place enough to just kind of hold the saw in so it's not falling out. So you don't have to tighten these up very far right now. And at this point, the next step is going to be reinstalling the top bracket on this upper handle. So This bracket's a 90-degree bracket. It's got a little opening here, and that's going to go on this bracket here. So you'll slide the little tab here down inside the opening in the handle. So get that in there, get the bolts through the holes, get the little serrated nuts on the backside in place, get those finger tight initially. You don't want these don't have to be very tight initially, because you want to have it just a little loose for adjustment. So I'm just going to put a little short round in here just to make sure that it's snug but not super tight. So all right, at that point you're going to want to raise the lower part of the base here. So you're going to bring this up, because basically you want to know that the blade part of the Portaband is going to line up with the opening for the blade in the base. So it's easy to do that when it's standing up on the table. You can just move the base up to it and see if it goes in, which we are pretty much right on there. It's going through there. Now it's just loose in there, so we want to make sure that that's obviously going to fit when it's tight. So you want to constantly make sure you recheck that. So what's going to happen is if you raise this up and you're not fitting in there, say the base to the top part of the handle here, say it's misaligned and your blade is not sliding through the hole, well, on the back side here there's these 3 large bolts, and that's what your 3/4 inch wrench is for. So when your blade is right in here, that's where it needs to be. If you're not meeting that and your blade is hitting the outside of the jig and not sliding in that opening, you can use these bolts, loosen them up, and you can slide the base to the head here and be able to line the blade in the jig. So yeah, we're pretty much right in line there. So what I'm going to do now is go ahead and install this back part of this plate. So we're going to spin this around here so you can see. This slides around the handle to help keep the handle in the right location. So get that lined up. Thread these bolts in, finger tight initially. Now, the one thing you're going to want to pay attention to, even though the blade is in the opening here, it's not totally square to the opening. So the blade is a little bit tighter to this side at the top and a little bit tighter to the bottom side, bottom here. So you can, using these adjuster knobs on both sides, you can kind of move this back and forth down here to be able to line up the blade a little bit that way a little better. So what I'm going to do, being that I'm a little closer on this side at the bottom, I need this to come this direction. So I'm going to loosen up the back side just a little bit and then tighten up that front side just a little more, just to kind of shift the bottom of the saw this way. So pretty close there. Now let's see, I would say at that we're pretty close there. And the other thing that these bolts do is that when this jig is set down, so I'm going to go ahead and lower this real quick just to show you. If you are cutting and say your blade is coming in from an angle and cutting to one side this way or the other way, when you get this lined up in there, what you can do is when you loosen those 3 bolts that are on the bottom side, not only does it allow you to move side to side, but the back part of this here is slotted, so you can actually move this in this direction to be able to line it up with your slot and make sure you're coming down straight into your cut. So that would be something, like I said, if you see that when you're coming down this way, it's not cutting straight down into your material. So the way to check that is with a square. So if you have a square here and you're coming down into your cut, you want to make sure that when you're lined up with your slot opening in the base, that your saw blade is then coming down straight into there following a nice perpendicular line to the table. So at that point, once you get that set, I'm gonna go ahead and give these a little bit more snug there, and I'm gonna make sure that this here plate on the top is in a good location to be able to, what you can do is to these handles to this, if you need to tilt the saw one way or the other in the jig too, this can be used to apply a little bit of pressure one side or the other. So that's looking pretty good right there. So I'm gonna go ahead and snug that up. I'm not putting a lot of pressure on it, just snugging it up so everything's in place initially. I'm gonna go ahead and put a little bit more. I'm gonna use a wrench and a socket, 1/2 inch, to be able to put a little bit more pressure on the handle here, a little bit there. This is just to make sure that everything's tightening in there properly and getting lined up. So there's that. So then the next thing you'll be wanting to do here, obviously, is install the trigger, because that's how you'll be able to work this. So I'll tilt this back so you can see here. All right, so with this standing up, you're going to take the little trigger arm here, and this is going to slide right here on the opening. This is your actual on-off switch. There's a little black lever here, but that's the on-off for this. That way you don't have to try to reach in and pull the trigger, that sort of thing, and that's what actually keeps it in place. So this little yellow arm, you're actually going to push this down a little bit, because you want this to slide in between that handle, because what it'll do when you actually hit it on, it will you'll push this down into place here, and it'll lock on down in the lock position. I don't have the bolt installed yet, but it'll lock in there, and then when you release this, this will pop up and you're good to go. So yeah, you want to slide that in, that little bolt on the other side. Is you're going to slide that, get that hole lined up, slide that in there, and that's a little shoulder bolt, so you'll be able to snug up on the back side, and it'll have a little bit of free play to allow you to easily move that without it being too tight. So I'm going to take that 11/32 socket and that little Allen wrench that we include with the Portaband Pro. So put that on there. All right, so that's in place there, and then when you have all that in there, let's see, might be a sweet spot when you tighten that, just to make sure that you have enough, a little bit of loose play in that handle. All right, so that's a little loose there. So yeah, when you go to hit that on, it'll pop down in place, and it'll hold it on. It's pressing down on the trigger of the saw, and then when you go to flip that up, it will pop back up in place there. So all right, and at that point, like I said, we're pretty good there. I'm going to go ahead and pop this gas shock back on, and then double check that we're in our right clearances there, which it appears that we are in pretty decent shape. Could move that just a little bit. So what I'm going to do is loosen up these knobs here. I'm going to loosen up the left one just a little more, put a little more pressure back on the right one, see what that does. Again, we're pretty straight there. Do a little bit more on this, a little bit off the left one, a little bit more on the right one. And there we are, right in there. So yeah, at that point, that's installing your jig. So obviously, you know, if you need the Portaband for the use of a Portaband to be able to use it as a handheld, cut, do that sort of thing, but then you want the jig to be able to give you the horizontal kind of chop saw capability and the vertical capability, this Portaband does a really good job at that. So once you have done this a handful of times, you're getting used to taking the saw out, putting it back in, getting it all lined up. And once you get some of the initial things lined up, you get the bottom part here lined up, those sort of things, it really will go in and out fairly quickly within the matter of a couple minutes, and makes it real nice to be able to use the Portaband for extra versatility in your shop. So if you do get the optional clamp here, you just need that 1/4 inch wrench to be able to loosen up that bolt. It's basically what you want to do is back that off, because this has a little sleeve on it here that actually has to slide down in this hole here, and then it has to clear the slot there. So you'll get that in place, and then that should be in place so you can lock down your material there. So that's the basic installation on the Portaband Pro. So hopefully this video will help you out a little bit. All the instructions are fairly detailed in here as far as, you know, getting your Portaband in the machine or in the jig and getting it dialed in where you need it. The last thing that I would say is that there is, in the little kit that we send you, there are a couple of shims in there, and they're super tiny, but what they do is they shim up here on the blade, so you can actually shim the blade one way or the other just a little bit, and do a little bit of shim work to make sure that everything's dialed in exactly where you need it. So all that is covered in the instructions. So like I said, hopefully this helps you out with your Portaband and getting it installed in the Portaband Pro. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.